come to the next occasion in the book of Daniel where we find our little group of friends together. But there is a change now, because there is no Daniel in these events. He's off somewhere else. We aren't sure or told where that was. Perhaps he's off on the king's business in another part of the empire. He's clearly not around in this chapter. But he has left 3 very good understudies behind. As we saw in the first half, he kept great company. And it's those 3 friends that we're going to spend some time looking at now. And we're going to see how that they were every bit as faithful as he was, even though he wasn't there. Now, to get to this story, we've skipped over probably the most famous chapter in Daniel, chapter 2. And that chapter is a standout chapter, not just in Daniel's prophecy, but in the whole of the Bible, isn't it? And I'm guessing that you will all know what's in chapter 2, and I would hope and expect that you've at least got something coloured in or something in your margins scribbled there, because it is such a well-known chapter. You know that Daniel chapter 2 is all about this. It's all about this image, and I'm sure that you know what it all means. You know that the Babylonian Empire, the Nebuchadnezzar's Empire, was represented by which colour? And I'm sure you're all sitting there saying, well, it's gold, and you're right. So another question for you, what's the colour of the statue, of the image that he's going to build in chapter 3? Well, that's gold as well, isn't it? So ask yourself, where does he get the inspiration from to do that? Well, it's got to be this dream and this image, hasn't it? He listened to Daniel's words, and he went from being troubled to being amazed by the interpretation. And he praised God, it says in Daniel chapter 2. Just look at verse 46 of chapter 2. It says, "Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel, and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odours unto him. The king answered unto Daniel and said, Of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods and a Lord of lords, Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal this secret." But here we are in the very next chapter, and his pride is back again. You know, the ego is ready to go. I think Nebuchadnezzar's biggest problem was his pride. He had a huge ego. I guess think Donald Trump. You know, that's what he's like in this chapter. And he's forgotten about the lesson of the dream. He's forgotten that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men. And this statue that he's building in chapter 3 is all about him. So we know how the statue had a head of gold, but it had feet of what? Well, you can see them on the screen, can't you? That the feet were clay and they were iron, an unstable mixture. And you know, that's what our world is like today. So it was an image that started splendidly, and then it degraded as you went down the length of the image. The materials got poorer and poorer as you looked at it from head to toe. And he was shown that dream so that he might probe his heart, and he might realize that he wasn't the greatest thing on earth. That actually Yahweh was the one who was orchestrating things. But do you know what I think happened? I think he couldn't forget that image. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't forget about it. And his pride and his ego couldn't let it go. And the dream and the image, I think it ate away at him. And here's why I think that's the case. Because in Daniel chapter 2, Daniel says to him, "You're this head of gold." And I think at the time, he'd have loved that. His pride and his ego would have felt really good as Daniel spoke those words. But then the message changes. And Daniel says, "But after you, another kingdom shall arise that's inferior to you." Now, here's his problem. He heard Daniel say that he was the greatest, and when the next kingdom comes, that won't be as great. It'll never match your kingdom, O king. But can you see how his mind turned over that information? Once he went away and thought about it, initially, I think he loved what he heard. He loved that he was a head of gold and that he sat on top of the image. But then he got to thinking about the rest of the image, and you see how his mind moved with what he knew. He thought about Daniel's words, and he decided that the inference was that he, the head of gold, was going to be replaced by a king and a kingdom inferior to him. And I don't think he liked that. You know, men like him don't like that sort of thing. If anyone's going to overtake his kingdom, it's going to be better than him, surely, not inferior to him. And I don't think he could accept it. And it gnawed at him until in the end, his pride and his ego won the day, and he decided in his heart that I'm not having that. God's not going to rule in my kingdom. I'm responsible for my destiny. And that is a lesson to every single one of us. Doesn't matter how old we are. We have to manage our egos. We have to understand that whatever we think about ourselves, you know, it's not how great we are. We talked about Hezekiah showing off in our first talk, didn't we? Nebuchadnezzar takes it to a whole other level now, because he gets his best craftsmen, he gets his best builders, and he says, you go and build me an image, all of gold, from head to foot. Don't you dare use any other material. And it wasn't just an image made his God. It was a challenge to Yahweh. What he's saying is, can Yahweh do as he says? And we'll see, won't we? Because I'm not going to bow to anyone. They're going to bow to me, he says. There won't be silver in my kingdom, and there won't be iron in my kingdom, or clay. I'm not going to have it. Gold is the only colour that matters. So you can see how wrong it was that he does this. He knew better, didn't he? But his pride and his ego were bigger. But the bigger fact, of course, is that what he's doing here is fighting against God's prophecy. So can you see how wrong Nebuchadnezzar was, but how right Daniel's three friends were to stand up against this? Because they believed that God was faithful to his prophecy. I'm sure Daniel told them about it, so they would know exactly what was going on here, and that he, God, would fulfill it. So Nebuchadnezzar sends his best builders off to create this statue of gold. And you know, it's interesting, the dimensions that they made it, because what we find is that for some strange reason, the same number keeps coming up now. Let's just have a look at that. Firstly, how tall was it? Well, chapter 3, verse 1 says it was 60 cubits tall, which is about 90 feet. And it says the breadth was 6 cubits. And have you noticed in verse 5 how many instruments are listed? Well, you'll see there's 6 of them. So for this image, it has 666 as its brand. It's all flesh, isn't it? That's what Revelation chapter 13, verse 18 tells us is the number of man. 666, and here's 3 6s. And he set it up, it says in verse 8. He set it up, it says, and 8 times in this chapter, it's going to tell us that he set it up, that Nebuchadnezzar set it up. So not only is God's ability to rule being challenged here, Nebuchadnezzar himself is the one who's directly doing it. Me, me, me. 8 times the Bible tells us in just a few verses that it was him that was doing it. There's no denying whose idea this was. This is completely Nebuchadnezzar. This was something very personal to him, and his pride is running riot. And where did he put it? What is the place called? Well, verse 1 says it was the plain of Dura. And that's interesting too, that the word plain means a circle, a perpetual circle, something that has no end, it's endless. And the word Dura means defense. And what he's saying, I think, by putting it where he did, was that he was going to defend the endlessness of his kingdom. That there won't be anything other than gold, he says. The rest of that dream, in that image that I just had, isn't happening. Pride, once again. And he's saying, God will not end this. Gold will be the colour that lasts forever. And did you see that he put it in a plain, in a desert place? Do you know why he did that? Or one of the reasons he did that? Well, I think it's all to do with that image in chapter 2, the dream in chapter 2. Do you remember that in that dream, it tells us that the image was struck on the feet by a rock that was cut out of the mountain? Well, if you put an image in the desert, there are no mountains. So who's going to knock the image over, is what he's thinking, if I put it out in the middle of nowhere? And he was deadly serious about getting everyone to bow down, wasn't he? So he needs lots of space for people to be able to come and do that. So a desert suited both his purposes. And he was very, very serious that everyone should bow down. Did you see in verse 2 and 3 how all of the top people of this mighty empire are brought together to worship this thing? We're talking about a serious amount of organization. There's thousands upon thousands of people involved here. And he called them all together because of one word in verse 2, and that's the word dedication. He sent out posts to every corner of his empire to bring all the rulers to dedicate that image. And the dedication had one purpose, and that was, is Yahweh the true God? And if he is, then does he have the ability to end this mighty kingdom? And as we said in the first half, Babylon was such an amazing place. It was so incredible, you just couldn't see it ever ending. And our world's been a bit like that until very recently. In those days, there were no nuclear bombs, no guns even. The city was huge. It had hundreds of kilometers of walls that went 12 feet underground, so you weren't digging your way in. The river Euphrates ran through the middle of it, so there was always water. You had enough space to grow food and look after animals. It was completely self-sufficient. It was an amazing place. And he's absolutely proud of what's been built. And so he's challenging God to see if he can end it. Well, Nebuchadnezzar was going to learn the hard way, wasn't he? Verse 5, we read about the signal that all the people would need to listen out for. Verse 5, that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. And the Babylonians loved music. We know that from history. And we said it's only 6 instruments that's mentioned, that the number of flesh. Music of the flesh is what they liked. But did you see that it also said all kinds of music? And these were added to those 6 named instruments, which is really clever. Because what he did was he got a very special band together. He got the best musicians he could find from across this empire, and he got them to play all kinds of music. In other words, he got them to play music that every member of his audience from every nation he had conquered would recognize. He used the music to sort of whip up mass hysteria and feeling here, on the basis that they all gave allegiance to the image of gold. When the music started, no matter where you were from in the world at that time, you heard something familiar from an instrument unique to your country. And it was something you could relate to. But Nebuchadnezzar linked that to the worship of his image. And it meant you were subservient to that image, which stood for Babylon, the endless kingdom of Babylon. That's what it's all about. So what he did is a bit like we saw here yesterday with the VE Day things. There was this idea of national patriotism stirred up, and music can do that, can't it? I know that many of you love your music, and you love your music, I suggest, and how it makes you feel. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you not to listen to your music. Your parents can control that. I love music. I play the piano, and I listen to music nearly every day. I believe in it's got incredible ability to move us, and not in a bad way necessarily. I'm really missing singing hymns at the moment because we can't do it together like we usually do. It's one of the greatest privileges we have, actually. I wish we were all much keener to do it. But music does have the power to excite. It can move the emotions, and younger people especially are more easily influenced by it. Now, I've got 3 brothers. 2 chose to be baptized, and 1 sadly hasn't yet. I've seen firsthand how his love for the music of this world can cause someone to take direction from the words of songs rather than the word of God. I've witnessed how music can be used to whip a person up into a mental state that can appear enjoyable. It can change how a person behaves. In your head, it can become what we think to be true because it's that powerful. So do enjoy your music, but make sure it's varied, and really, really make sure it's the rhythm of the truth that directs how you behave, not cleverly written words and notes from artists who have no understanding of the deeper principles that we try and live by in the truth. Because that is what Nebuchadnezzar was doing here. He was literally swaying the emotions with the sorts of music he was playing. He made it feel good to bow down. That's exactly what the world wants. But if that didn't work, he had plan B. Look at verse 6. And whoso falleth not down and worshippeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. So plan B stood for burning. And woe betide you if you don't do what I say. There's only one punishment here for not obeying. Now, it's interesting, isn't it, if we think about it? We know that all of the pagan countries around Israel at this time, whoever they were, they all shared respect for each other's religions. They might not have understood them exactly, but they respected each other's religions. So there was next to no one in that audience who couldn't conscientiously fall down to worship that image when the music started up, to pay homage to the god of Babylon. Because that's what would happen in other circumstances if the Babylonians weren't in charge. If it was a different nation, there was respect between nations in a way for their false gods. But the Jews were never permitted to do that. What did Exodus command them? You know the words, don't you? Thou shalt have no other gods but me. Thou shalt make no graven image of any god. Thou shalt not bow down to any graven image. And there were 3 young men out there on that plain in Jura who had a conscience. Just 3. The rest, well, that's what we see today, isn't it? You know, we can see how different denominations can all respect each other. You know, but we know as Christadelphians that we're told very clearly, this is the way, walk ye in it, because there isn't another way. We haven't got the liberty, we haven't got the right to respect what is wrong. We respect people, yes we do, but we can never respect wrong religion. There is one God, who is our Father, and one Lord Jesus Christ, his Son, who is our coming King. And that's the stand we have to make. And out there, on that desert plain, there were only 3 young men who made the same stand. They were brave for sure, but they weren't just brave, were they? They were smart. They were really smart. Because what they realized and what they knew was that there was an alternative to Nebuchadnezzar's furnace. And they knew it was an even more terrifying one. Let me show you that. Just come back to Deuteronomy chapter 4. Just have a look at what God promised would happen if they did bow down. Deuteronomy and chapter 4. This is what it says in verse 23. Take heed unto yourselves, lest ye forget the covenant of the Lord your God, which he made with you, and make you a graven image, or the likeness of anything which the Lord thy God hath bidden thee. For the Lord thy God is a consuming fire, even a jealous God. So take your pick. Which one would you choose? You can have Nebuchadnezzar's furnace, or you can face God's consuming fire. And you see, the Apostle Paul in Hebrews 12 also quoted that verse. I'll put it on the screen for you, because there were Jews in his day who wanted to go back to the synagogue. They wanted to leave the truth. And his warning was, our God is a consuming fire. So you might be thrown into Nebuchadnezzar's furnace and reduced to ashes. It might work to make that happen, but so what? God can raise up children to Abraham from anything, can't he? It says in the New Testament. But he who gets thrown in front of Yahweh's consuming fire, well, he isn't coming back, is he? And that was the choice that Daniel's friends knew they had. It wasn't a cloudy issue for them. They saw it in black and white. So back in Daniel 3, the music sounds and the people heard it, and they fell down flat. And you see, what Nebuchadnezzar had done was to pick the location of the statue carefully. I think this place was completely flat. There was nothing there apart from this image. And this thing's 90 feet high. That's about 6 double-deckers on top of each other. You know, it's surrounded by a host of international visitors. It's got all the greatest names and faces from the kingdom present. The best orchestra in the world at the time. They're playing away. There's this patriotic music. The atmosphere is electric, and the music pipes up, and they all fall flat, apart from 3 young men. Now, talk about standing out. You couldn't make it any more obvious, could you? There was nowhere to hide. Like lighthouses, they would have stood out. But they knew what God's law said, that they couldn't bow down. They knew there was a worse fate awaiting them if they did. So with courage and faith, they stood tall. They were like pillars in that place. The question is, could you do that? You know, at school or work, could you do that? If someone asked you what you do on Sundays, or what you did this evening, or what you've been doing this week, let me tell you that the baptized Christadelphians will have been in that situation at some point. And I'm sure a fair few of those wouldn't have been as brave as Daniel's friends were here. It's really not easy to be different. But if you ever need an example to look at to help you with that, just think about these 3 young men and see if you can find the courage and faith to be like them, to stand up for God, to be on fire for the truth. Don't just fall flat on your face because you're afraid to be laughed at. These 3 held firm to what they knew to be right. And remember, Daniel wasn't with them. They've got the same faith as him. Now, somehow, Nebuchadnezzar didn't see them standing up, but there were others who did. And they made sure that Nebuchadnezzar found out. And there are people in the world today who are like that. Whilst most people won't really care what we believe, there will always be some who love this sort of situation, who love causing problems. And there were some in the crowd on that day who hated the Jews, and that's always been the case. That's why they called them the Jews in this chapter, isn't it? It was a term of contempt. They didn't mean it in a nice way. Look at verse 8. Wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. So the Chaldeans, who I'd suggest are like the scribes and the Pharisees of the New Testament here, and they come to the king and they say in verse 9, "Oh, king, live forever." See the line they're taking, can't you? "Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man shall hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worshippeth, that he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace." So they're very careful with their choice of words here. And in verse 12, they say with not so much disguised disgust, but certain Jews. And in a different voice, Jews that you set over the kingdom, you know, inferring this was a big mistake. We shouldn't promote foreigners, O king. Not the done thing. It doesn't work out well. And what they're saying to Nebuchadnezzar here is, it's got very cunning inflection, hasn't it? Is that these Jews that you've elevated, they haven't appreciated, they haven't respected, and they haven't honoured what you've given them. It was very cleverly worded. And it gets worse, because in verse 12, do you see what they were named? They give them the names of these three men, but you noticed it was their Babylonian names that they use. In other words, they're saying these three adopted Babylonians are not living up to the names you've given them. This is treason. And finally, they said at the end of verse 12, another little white lie, didn't they? When they said that the Jews hadn't regarded the king in their actions. And they're appealing to Nebuchadnezzar's fragile ego. They reminded him that he was the one who'd set up the image, and that these three were clearly not respecting him by doing what they were doing. And that wasn't true, because when you look at how they speak later in this chapter and how Daniel always spoke to the kings he dealt with, they always did so in an absolutely respectful way. We talked about having the right spirit, didn't we? They always had the right spirit. These Chaldeans knew exactly what they were doing, and they were playing to his ego. So did it work? Well, it did, didn't it? Verse 13, then Nebuchadnezzar in his rage and fury commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. And we know that Nebuchadnezzar had a temper, and these Chaldeans knew it too. And yet you know that despite his anger, he had respect for these three men. And you know how we know that? Well, look at verse 14. He doesn't just take the Chaldeans' word for it. He gets these three men in front of him and he says, is it true? If you have a margin, it says, is it a purpose? So he's saying to them, when you didn't bow down, did you do that with deliberate purpose? Is it true what they're saying? But then just think about the next bit. Think about how powerful this king was, how great his respect must have been for these three young men. He knew who they were. He's not going to have forgotten how great they were in his kingdom, is he? He knew they were assets that he didn't want to lose. Because in verse 15, what he does is he gives them a second chance. He says, okay, we'll repeat the exercise. And when the music sounds again and you bow down, then that's fine. We'll say no more about it. And just think for a moment what he's saying there. He's going to reorganize the whole show. But this isn't like laying chairs out in our halls, is it? Imagine it. Nebuchadnezzar says, right, get everybody back. All the international visitors, all the dignitaries, all the people, someone round up the orchestra. We're going to go again. Now, it was a huge thing to rerun the exercise. And he was prepared to do that just for these three men. You think about that. And you know what he said to them in verse 15? He says, if you're ready at the sound of the music to do what I want, then well. But the end of the verse says, and who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Who is he? Not in a great place spiritually, is he, Nebuchadnezzar? Daniel chapter 2 wasn't that long ago, but he seems to have forgotten everything about the God that Daniel revealed to him. It's like the world saying to us, so you're a Christadelphian. Do you really believe you're the only ones who have the truth? That your God is really just the God of Israel and those who are baptized into Jesus? Are you really sure he isn't the God of all the other churches as well? Do you really believe that? Who is your God really? And he was trying to shake their belief and need in their God. And he says, all this, he's still prepared to give them time to think it over. They didn't need time to think it over, did they? The answer came straight back. And look at this for an answer. Verse 16. Oh, Nebuchadnezzar, we're not careful to answer thee in this matter. In other words, we don't need time to answer you, O king. We don't need to think about it. We know now we won't do it. Now, Daniel's not there, is he? But here are the other three. And you'd have thought that one of them, might have felt that the heat to soften this situation, to sort of cave in. That one of them might have broken ranks and changed his mind, maybe, but none of them did. They're facing a death sentence, being roasted alive, but they stood shoulder to shoulder. That's why it's really, really important to have friendships, the right friendships, with those in the meeting, with those who understand and believe like you do. And because of that, look at the rest of their words in verse 17. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. It's incredible faith, isn't it? They absolutely believed that God would deliver them, but didn't presume that he would. But to them, that wasn't a problem. But the problem was that they weren't going to bow down to false gods or worship that image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Did you see the end of verse 18? The golden image which thou hast set up. So, O king, we don't need to think about it. We won't worship the way that you want. We have a God who can deliver us if he chooses to. But if not, you need to know two things. One, we have no respect for your gods. And two, we have no respect for your ego. We won't worship those gods. We won't worship the image because you have set it up. Ouch, if you're Nebuchadnezzar. And whatever respect Nebuchadnezzar might have had for them, that's now well and truly gone, isn't it? Look at verse 19. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. To turn a phrase, he went off the deep end, didn't he? He absolutely lost it. A bit like parents do sometimes, I suppose. His visage, his whole expression changed towards them, which tells us that the first time earlier in the chapter that he was angry, it was mostly for show. He respected these young men deep down, and so didn't go straight to the level of rage he's now at. He offered them a second chance because of that respect and because of how they behaved previously. But when they knocked that second chance back, when they said, "No way are we doing what you want," he just exploded. And he went completely over the top, and he told them to heat that furnace 7 times more than it needed to be. It doesn't mean that he upped the temperature 7 times. It means he pushed the heat and the pressure up way beyond the safety valve. He really got that thing going. Now, have any of you ever felt the heat of a furnace, a real furnace, I mean? In my work life, a good few years ago, and I work in health and safety, but a good few years ago, I visited some very interesting agricultural businesses. I'll never forget when I visited a place where fallen stock like horses and sheep and cows are sent to be burned because they can't be eaten. Not that you'd want to eat any of those animals, I promise you. But when I got there, the man who ran the place was in a big, huge shed, and he had 2 massive furnaces, which usually have their doors shut while they burn away. When I walked in, one of the doors was open, and he was driving his big forklift truck with a massive long metal prod on it, and he was going backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, and he was whacking something inside the furnace because it wouldn't break down, it wouldn't break up. Turns out it was a dead rhino that had lived a long and happy life from a safari park somewhere. But the point is this, that the temperature inside that furnace was 3,000 degrees Celsius. And it was so hot, he was sweating inside his cab. I couldn't get anywhere near the door. It was that hot. The heat was just incredible. And Nebuchadnezzar wanted his furnace at the same temperature as that. He wanted it heated 7 times. And I think it's interesting that he says that, because just come with me to Psalm 12 and look here at what Daniel's friends did. And this psalm, Psalm 12, talks about proud men. Psalm 12, and look at verse 3. And just look at this. This psalm almost describes this whole situation for us. The Lord shall cut off all flattering lips and the tongue that speaketh proud things. And that was the Chaldeans, wasn't it? That was what the Chaldeans did. Who have said, with our tongue will we prevail, our lips are our own. Who is Lord over us? And that's Nebuchadnezzar himself, isn't it? For the oppression of the poor, the sighing of the needy, now will I arise, saith the Lord. I will set him in safety from him that puffeth at him. The words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. That's how you fight fire with fire. That's why we need to be on fire for the truth. Those verses there are this incident, aren't they? Can you see it? Verse 4, who's Lord over us? That's what Nebuchadnezzar meant when he said, who's that's going to save you? And the answer that comes back from Yahweh in verse 6 is that my word is pure, and it's like silver that's been purified 7 times. So go ahead, Nebuchadnezzar. Heat that furnace 7 times if you want. It will never be as pure as my word, which these 3 friends are upholding. It's fire with fire, isn't it? They were stoking up the furnace of God's word in their minds and in their hearts, and their faith could not be challenged. What a great example they are to you and me. But Nebuchadnezzar thinks he's got all the answers, and in verse 20 he calls in the army, doesn't he? He calls his most mighty men, and I don't think for a moment he thought the 3 friends were going to make a run for it and try and escape. It's all about pride again, isn't it? He simply wanted to add to the drama of the situation. So his international visitors and dignitaries, world-famous orchestra, and now he brings in his best troops. He didn't need to do that. These 3 would have walked into that furnace without any soldiers. And in verse 21, do you see how he's in such a rush? He doesn't bother dressing them like prisoners. He leaves them fully clothed. More to catch fire, I bet he thinks. And then in verse 22, he's in such a rush, and he's so urgent to get this done that the furnace wasn't under control. And his best men end up getting roasted. Renowned warriors burnt to a crisp because he can't wait to fry these 3 Jews. But do you know what that proved? Well, it proved one thing, didn't it? It proved that the fire worked, didn't it? And that's a funny thing to say, but it worked on the outside of the furnace. There was no magic in the fire, was there? It was just regular fire, really hot and lethal. So what follows then has to be a miracle, doesn't it? Verse 23 says, and these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound in the midst of the burning, fiery furnace. They're thrown in, fully clothed, and they fall to the floor as the flames reach and kill those brave warriors who'd been instructed to throw them in. And the king, of course, is on the outside, at a safe distance looking in. But by verse 26, he's coming as close as he can get. You see, verse 24, he was astonished. And you picture this. He sees 3 or more of his own men burnt to a crisp. He sees the 3 friends hurled into the furnace, fully expecting them to go the same way and pretty quickly. But then suddenly he stands up and he says, wise men, come here. Have I gone mad? Am I crazy? And they're like, no, king, why? And he says, didn't we throw 3 men in there? Yes, we did. Yeah, we did. Weren't they tied up? Yes. I can see 4 now. And they're walking around. And he calls his council in right there and then. And they have this conference by the furnace. And he's really struck by the 4th one, isn't he? End of verse 25 says, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. And that's a little bit confusing, but you need to make a note that he's not talking about Jesus here. because some have tried to suggest that it is. That word God there is in the plural. What he's really saying is that the fourth one looks like a son of the gods. And in verse 28, he identifies this fourth man as an angel, because that's what he was. And I think it was probably Michael, but I'm absolutely certain about that. So what I want you to do now is just get your pencils ready, and either in your Bibles or on your note paper, I want you to write down the 10 things, for me anyway, that prove that all of this was a miracle. And these have been in my margin for years, so it's good to be able to share them with you. Right, here we go. The 10 things that I think you need to take note of here to prove this was a miracle. Point 1, the fire has never been hotter. Point 2, he had his best and toughest men in charge. He has these three friends are all tied up. Point 4, they're fully clothed, so there's plenty of material to catch fire. The fire worked, as we know, even on the outside, because it killed those guards. The friends fell down in the middle of the furnace, which would have been the hottest part. Then they're seen standing, and there's 4 of them. They didn't stop in any one place because they're walking around into every corner of the furnace. They didn't get lucky somehow and find a series of cool spots to jump to. They came out, there was no marks on their body, their hair wasn't burnt, and they don't smell of smoke or of fire. Now, all of that happened to prove to Nebuchadnezzar that Yahweh was in charge, as he should have known. And those 10 points prove it. And he's so thunderstruck with this in verse 26. It draws him to the region of danger. He forgets how hot it is. He can't believe what he's seeing. He's just watched his top soldiers die, and he still can't help himself as he draws near. And he calls out to them. And look at the language he uses in verse 26. Ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Now that's a title that's rarely used, but you do find it in Genesis 14 as it's used by Melchizedek, who was also a servant of the Most High God. And the king's learning, isn't he? But look at how it reads in verse 26. Look what the key word is here. Ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then. And that's the most important word. Because what that means is that the friends could have left the furnace whenever they wanted. But they are walking around in the furnace, waiting for him to tell them to come out. That's incredible. Because, if you or I were in there, how would you feel? Okay, you've got faith and you aren't being burnt, but it's still fire. I'd still be pretty nervous about being in there. I'd be wanting to get out as soon as possible. But that's not what they did. They walked around until they were told to come out. And that meant that the king was compelled to do something. And he says to them in verse 28, and think about these words as they echo across the kingdom. Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god, except their own God. So in front of all those people, this proud king acknowledges the power of God once again. He had no choice really, did he? And you see the important bit. He said they have changed the king's word. That word change in the concordance means transgress, to set to naught, to reject. And he stood there and he said, these 3 men have a belief in a God which has made me reject my own words. Amazing, isn't it? And then he says, they've yielded their bodies. Now that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Where else in the Bible does that idea come up? And more importantly, what's the context? What's it talking about? Well, come back with me to Romans chapter 6. There's this chapter again that talks about baptism, which is so important, isn't it, to all of us, particularly at your age, young people. Romans chapter 6. And this is what these 3 friends have done. Romans chapter 6. Look at verse 16. Know ye not that to whom ye yield yourselves servants to obey, his servants ye are to whom ye obey, whether of sin unto death, or of obedience unto righteousness? But just go back to verse 13. Neither yield ye your members as instruments of unrighteousness unto sin, but yield yourselves unto God as those that are alive from the dead, and your members as instruments of righteousness unto God. Sin shall not have dominion over you. And if and when you're baptized, God willing, you will yield your body under the water. Why? Well, because we refuse to bow down to the golden image of sin. That's why. Ignore the golden images of this world. Self is the biggest and ugliest image ever. Me, myself, and I'm owed a living. I have rights. I'll do what I want. That is the image that we must refuse to yield to above any other. We've got to yield our bodies to one God only. Nebuchadnezzar realized that. Chapter 3 again of Daniel and verse 29. Daniel 3 verse 29. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. And did you see that he personally made that decree? There was no herald this time. Straight from his lips those words came. Their God is perfect, is what he's saying. And isn't it wonderful that he didn't get up and praise these men? He didn't say, aren't they brilliant and brave and obviously fireproof? He simply said, their God is perfect. Their actions brought glory to God, and this king saw it, and he made sure everyone else did. And that's the one thing we have to remember when doing this. It's the right thing for God that we have to do. When that seems hard to do and it's different and it's challenging, we're doing it to glorify our Heavenly Father. And as a result, look at what happened to them. They were promoted in the end. And that's what the promise is that we all can have if we resist the idols and the ideals of this world. If we can stay on fire for the truth and bear the trials that life will bring. What great examples these friends are for you and for me. In it together from the very beginning. They stuck together as they developed an appetite for the truth. And then they passionately followed it, literally walking into fire for it. And I suppose my final message for you, my precious young people and brothers and sisters, is this. Please don't let your fires go out. Spark by irreplaceable spark. We're living in a funny world. And while we wait for God's purpose to fulfill itself, we do have to navigate this lockdown with all its not quites and not yets. Don't despair in lonely frustration for the life we desperately want but can't yet reach. Because the world we desire can be won. It exists. It's real. It's possible. And through God's grace, it's ours. And we can get there if we stick together. If we choose our friends carefully, if we settle and determine in our hearts to make God the center of what we do. We are in this together. And there's no better place to be. Because his promise is that we will be 10 times better off than those around us. He will promote us. He will reward us with wisdom and understanding that we can only dream of when his kingdom arrives. So let's make sure that we're ready for him. Let's be brave in our choices. Let's conduct ourselves in the right way and try to develop a spirit that both man and God can appreciate. Thank you for listening. May God bless us all and send his beloved Son very soon.